You are listening to ESG News and Views from the Conference Board.
Hello and welcome to ESG News and Views, a podcast from the Conference Board. This is Jeff Hoffman, Institute Leader of Corporate Citizenship and Philanthropy here at the Conference Board's ESG Center. In this episode, we'll turn our attention to the role of corporate citizenship and philanthropy in supporting small business. Since the pandemic hit, we have seen businesses of all sizes struggle. But small businesses don't necessarily have the safety nets that the larger companies have to keep them going. Corporate philanthropy, which typically focuses on helping communities through nonprofit organizations, are looking beyond traditional models to assist for-profit entities. So today we're going to discuss corporate support of small business with funding and expertise, working with intermediary organizations to help prop up existing small businesses, as well as supporting the next generation of entrepreneurs. While we've seen through the pandemic that companies have been supporting small businesses in different ways, we're going to learn some unique ways today. But we do want to highlight and thank all of the companies who have reached out, supporting their local businesses, the services and products that they do offer, helping them to keep their doors open, which means that they're employing people, and also that they are providing the goods and services to their communities. One way that we have seen quite a bit of it this year is with restaurants. And restaurants, I would say, in two different ways. One is we saw restaurants step up to the plate with filling the need of providing fresh food, working with local food banks and other entities. But we've also seen restaurants who have been serving meals to those frontline workers at hospitals and clinics. We've seen companies who have supported those efforts by sponsoring meals and doing so either through purchasing of gift cards or oftentimes through special funds set up through community foundations. So that has been a great benefit to these companies that might otherwise have had to shut their doors during the pandemic and sadly might have shut their doors down permanently. This work and what we're talking about with corporate citizenship support of small business is part of work that we're doing in the Conference Board about corporate citizenship's role in communities. And as we look at stakeholder capitalism and communities being one of the stakeholders, how can we be more efficient and effective with the work that we do with the local communities where we have employees, where we have operations, where we have customers, and just communities in general. So we're really looking forward to the discussion today and looking at new tools and opportunities for companies to support small businesses, which are truly pillars in cities and local communities. I'm delighted to be joined by our two guests. We have Jenny Flores, who is the head of Small Business Growth Philanthropy at Wells Fargo, and Elizabeth Gore, who is co-founder and president of HelloAlice.com. Jenny, let's start with you. What is the focus at Wells Fargo?
So we're focused on financial inclusion in communities that we serve. And so there are three areas that are connected to this commitment. One is small business growth, which is helping small businesses to scale and grow. Then we have our commitment to financial health, helping individuals to have a solid baseline of financial, both products and services that can help them reach their financial objectives. And then we have housing affordability, which is really it aims to make housing accessible and affordable to all Americans. So that is the focus of our Wells Fargo Foundation. I lead the small business growth philanthropy work, as you mentioned. And in my pillar, of course, helping to scale and grow businesses is the core, but we're also deeply focused on helping small businesses to stabilize and recover from the negative impacts of COVID-19.
Great. Good. Appreciate that. And Elizabeth, what is Hello Alice?
Sure. So we are a very active community of small business owners that help each other launch and grow. We're built on top of a machine learning platform that helps a business owner through the paths of the growth of their business based on their stage of growth, their physical location and industry. We're very proud to be the largest platform helping 350,000 owners for women, people of color, and our U.S. veterans. Additionally, our white male counterparts, and we ensure that we're digging as deep as possible to access as much capital for these small business owners, whether that is through grants, loans, as well as venture capital. So we're also really proud that we run the COVID-19 Business Center. It's covid19businesscenter.com to help small business owners navigate this really tough time with industry-specific tips, support on applying for federal aid, and most of all, peer-to-peer support for each other. So we're really proud to be with you today, Jeff. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. Thanks for being with us. That sounds like a great resource for businesses right now during the pandemic, and I'm impressed with your work with 350,000. So really great. Many companies focus their corporate citizenship and philanthropy programs on helping community-based organizations. But some, like Wells Fargo or Dell, which is where you used to be, Elizabeth, have focused on small businesses, not just as everyday business partners, but as recipients of corporate social responsibility efforts. Why is this important for corporations to support small businesses? Why don't we start with you, Jenny?
So small businesses are really the core of our economy. In 2020, there were 31 million small businesses. That's 99.9% of all U.S. businesses were small businesses, meaning with under 500 employees. They represent 50% of private sector employment. So that's millions of jobs. So for Wells Fargo, given that we have a commitment to financial inclusion and an inclusive economic recovery, we have to focus on small business. We have to help them to stabilize and to be able to pivot their business model for sustained growth so that we can protect the small businesses and the jobs which they create. So we see it as an imperative that this small business support is available through Wells Fargo, and that we grow our support to small businesses during this tough time.
Jenny, I think that's so important to point out that statistic, because as much as we hear about the big companies all the time, like a Wells Fargo, but most Americans do work. Most Americans work for small and medium-sized businesses, and that's where I think the work that you're doing is critical. And Elizabeth, besides your current role at Hello Alice, you've spent a good portion of your career helping companies to be more effective with their work in communities, plus the great efforts that you're doing now with Alice. What's your take on this with corporate citizenship and philanthropy's role?
Yeah, I look at it in two parts. One is our community. And, I think what we're starting to realize is how critical small businesses in our everyday lives, whether it's our cup of coffee we're getting in the morning, it is the childcare that's so critical to us, it's the basic services in our communities, it's the place we eat, the place we get our clothes cleaned. And then it's also basic services from construction to accounting. And so we literally cannot function as a society without the success of small business. When I look at our corporate partners, what I think a lot of people don't realize is how small business is really the beating heart of corporations. So their supply chains, their services, how the things are processed, and also like Wells Fargo, who's a great organization, many of these corporations rely on selling their business services to SMBs. So SMBs, in addition to what was stated, are additioning to the jobs they're creating, are also really the cog in the wheel that's functioning our society, whether it's our community or it is our corporations.
Yeah, and Elizabeth, I would love for you to expand on that, because you're absolutely correct there. But yet here we're in this unusual situation. And what kind of support do small businesses need that they cannot currently get from the marketplace?
Well, no, the absolute number one is access to capital. And so and fast capital. And the most important things that corporations and government can do right now is put forward grants. So we have been at Hello Alice issuing, we're happy to say, millions of dollars in grants from companies that really understand the importance of immediate spend needs like rent relief, paying taxes, ensuring payroll is going, even if there's less receipts coming in. These are critical small funding, and I'm talking about $5,000, $10,000 checks. Additionally, we have disproportionate effect of women and people of color who own small businesses, mostly because there's maybe not the same amount of capital in the bank, and or they are disproportionately needed for childcare, elder care, and so on. And so getting that capital in the hands of these businesses is critical. The second is ensuring our businesses are not in isolation. This is a very difficult time. I don't care how great of a business owner and a planner you are. None of us could have expected this. So how are we getting the mental health support these businesses need, the navigation tools they need? And so on Hello Alice, we have a Business for All community that has peer-to-peer mentorship. It has a mental health center. It's ensuring that these kind of demoralizingly tough decisions like closing your business or furloughing employees are supported. So I'll just go back to say capital and mentorship.
Okay, and I think that's a great segue back to Jenny to talk about, some of what you're doing, because that's what you are providing with your efforts is capital and how you do tie in other resources to help support them.
No, I just want to build on Elizabeth's point that absolutely capital is the number one thing. And so when Wells Fargo was designing a response last year, we took that into consideration. Like cash is king. So we developed something called the Open for Business Fund. And this was, it's a $400 million effort that directs capital to CDFIs. These are community development financial institutions who operate in local communities. They know how to reach diverse entrepreneurs who are the hardest hit. And we enabled that kind of quick access to capital. We provided $250 million to the CDFI industry to help diverse entrepreneurs. And we had very flexible terms on that. We had grants. If the CDFI felt that that's what the business needed to stabilize, we allowed them to do grants. If there were businesses who could absorb a new loan, we allowed them to do those loans, but we kept the interest rate at 3% because we believe that at a time like this, we should keep that interest rate as low as possible. So we basically enabled interest rate write-downs. We also allowed for payment deferrals if they had existing customers on the books that couldn't pay their loans. If that would make a difference to hold the payment on the loan, we did that. We allowed them to do that. We also supported the actual community development financial institutions with loan loss reserve. This is a really important point because as these CDFIs are making loans to higher risk businesses, we enable that so that they can protect their balance sheet, so they can help more businesses at whatever stage they're in. So we felt that our Open for Business Fund is very responsive to the need and to the reality that small businesses are facing, and we're really proud of the effort.
Yeah, the Open for Business Fund is really interesting, but yet you sit in the Wells Fargo Foundation. So can you tell us a little bit about, how your work helping small businesses might differ from your traditional philanthropic support to other organizations? You touched on some of the types of support that you offer, but I think those of us in the corporate philanthropy space are curious about, a little bit about the process, the criteria you use in screening organizations, and is we're all trying to measure our success business. How are you approaching that as well?
Yeah, I would say, and I want to clarify that the Open for Business Fund were not charitable dollars. What we did as an organization is we knew that small businesses needed support. And when we engaged in the Paycheck Protection Program through the Small Business Administration, all the fees that we generated from processing the loans, we did about 10.5 billion loans in the first round of PPP. We took those dollars and set them aside for a reinvestment into small business. And that's how we created the Open for Business Fund. So it was really a business response to the need that we saw that was growing. And it was really the diverse small businesses were really hard hit. So we narrowed the dollars to emphasize diverse small business owners. But I would say that what makes it unique in a corporation like Wells Fargo is that we have integrated our commitment to small business, both on the philanthropy and on the business side. Open for Business being one example of how the business stepped up to do more. But we stay very connected in terms of the strategy, the segmentation work, as we start to understand the customer base and the need in the community. Our outreach is very integrated. I do a lot of speaking in the community, but so does the head of a small business. We're getting ready to go co-present at an event in March, so that we can bring that perspective of here's the business, this is what we're doing. On the second round of PPP, for example, we're committed to ensuring that those diverse small businesses who we didn't see apply in the first round, that they know that this is accessible. So we're geocoding all of our customers into zip codes and making sure that we get information to them about how they can apply if they're in a low moderate income zip code. We want them to apply. We want to be there for them. And we have to be proactive about it. So I would say that it's a very effective way of working to generate outcomes and impact that's really tangible and meaningful. The business and the philanthropy have to be aligned.
Yeah, and I think that's really an important point to make. I mean, when you specifically said business, responding to a need, and I think this is something that, oftentimes with a philanthropic grant, it might be for a year, it might be for 3 years, which are important and they do good work. But when it's really embedded in the business and is what you do, what your products and services do, and how you execute on that is really going to create sustained change and make a difference that you don't often find with some of the traditional philanthropic tools. So I think that partnership that you have created there is really, really critical. While we're talking about that and how this fits into your philanthropic strategy at Wells Fargo, I mean, you talked about, housing affordability, financial health, and small business growth. Can you talk a little bit about how these issues relate to each other? And that kind of ties into what I was talking about with the, overall community ecosystem of healthy communities.
Absolutely. We see the connection in the fact that we have a deep commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when you look at these issues, right, if you look at them from financial health perspective, we recognize that for diverse populations, there are more unbanked and underbanked individuals that are diverse. And so we try to get under the root. We're doing a lot of systems change work, root cause analysis. Why is it happening? Why is it that for diverse communities, they have less access to traditional bank services? Then we saw that play out in PPP. For the first round, you had to have a bank relationship, a traditional banking relationship to be able to apply for PPP loans. And then again, we saw a number of small businesses that were diverse that didn't get access, either because they didn't know their banker, they didn't have a relationship in that way, they didn't have a bank in their community. And then you start to realize financial health is really important and it can have an impact to a small business owner. And then you think about the negative impacts of COVID and what's happening with housing affordability and so many families who cannot afford to pay their rent or their mortgage. And so how do we as a team work together to create a holistic strategy that addresses all of those needs in combination to produce outcomes that are meaningful, that help people have a strong financial baseline for themselves, that have access to affordable products, that they have a relationship with their financial institution. In this case, we want it to be with Wells Fargo. So how do we connect the dots? And we're doing a lot of that through our strategies. Like we have a commitment to ensuring that our outcomes are connected and that we can track if we're improving the credit score for individuals, does that translate to small business, right? Because a lot of small businesses for diverse communities are sole proprietors. So it's one and the same. If they can improve their credit score, it has a meaningful impact to their business. So that's how we're looking at it in a very cohesive, connected way.
Yeah, very smart. And I think, when you're talking about the financial health aspect, and when you mentioned PPE, and, how many stories have we heard about, trying to apply for PPE when you're a very small business and you run everything off of your mobile phone, and how do you fill out all that paperwork? And you're right, if they don't necessarily have a relationship with the bank and the type of documentation they need. And that's why I know on the philanthropic side, we've all been talking a lot about equity in grant making and what are those unintentional barriers that we've all put up in the past, which has really prevented some of those who need the support the most from getting it. So speaking of equity, Elizabeth, on your Hello Alice website, you have this line, I think is your mission. We aren't just leveling the playing field, we're redefining it. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So what we talk about at Hello Alice is we serve the new majority of business owners. So women, collectively, the numbers of women, people of color, the LGBTQ plus community, veterans, military spouses, entrepreneurs with disabilities, outnumber the traditional demographics of small business. And we see that as a huge opportunity, both for our economy, for social values, for jobs. It's an exciting time. But, our women, people of color, vets, we access resources differently. We have different types of networks. I love Wells Fargo's commitment to dig deep into communities because we are really going to have to redefine the way we offer capital, the way we reach out with new business services, because we are all in a very positive way, very different and diverse in the way we access resources. So at Hello Alice, we believe deeply in partnerships. So we are now the largest platform for Black and African American small business owners. Part of that is because we work day and night with the NAACP and Black and Brown Founders and Digital Undivided and Div Inc., Black Girl Ventures, to ensure that the data we're using and the access we're providing is not just to the individual, but it's also through these critical networks. And I'll just say, Jeff, I wanted to mention on deploying capital, which maybe was traditionally philanthropic, but now to for-profit entities like small business owners. Coming out of 10 years at the UN, I really understand the critical nature of having a strong fiduciary, the vetting process, and so on. And we are able to do the same thing for our for-profit small businesses. So we have deep applications. We do a lot of scoring and vetting. We love digital transformation and machine learning because it allows us to go even deeper and faster on scoring applications so we can deploy capital faster. There's, of course, the need to follow up and so on. But you have to also think about, we're doing grants, for example, for restaurant owners. I don't think, other than dairy farmers, there's a busier small business owner than a restaurant owner in terms of just the sheer volume of being on your feet, working with customers, working with employees, getting your supply chain moving. And so we have to ensure that we're mobile enabled, that we're picking up the phone and calling, that we're not thinking that they're sitting on email all day and they're going to apply to things. So we just have to be really smart about, construction's another area that we really think about. How are folks accessing information in different ways? So I think that it's critical that we do redefine how we access small business, how we serve them, how do we sell to them, But most of all, who are the faces of these new founders, and how are we going to partner with frontline organizations to ensure that we're serving everyone?
Yeah, that I think the new face is something that we often don't think of. I mean, for those of us who do sit in front of email all day long and Zoom and all of that, when you're actually out there running a store, running a restaurant, etc., that is not the case. So again, that accessibility is really critical. One of the things I wanted to pick up on is collaboration, and I'm curious. And Jenny, we'll start with you on how you work with government and community organizations, because this work is so critical, but at the same time, we know it can't be done in a vacuum.
Yeah, so for us, we believe that cross-sector partnership is very powerful. And we have worked very closely with local, state, and even federal governments to ensure that we are providing support to small businesses who need it most. And so as an example, we were one of the founding investors in the California Rebuilding Fund that launched last year through the leadership of our Governor Newsom here. And the strategy behind that fund was that they were going to help small businesses to recover from the pandemic and to access really flexible loans. And the way they're going to capitalize the fund was through private and public donations. Right? The state put money in to help launch the fund, and then they went out and raised additional capital. We invested $5 million into the fund. And then we have an investment group that also invested additional capital in the fund. We did the same thing in New York. The New York Forward Fund had a very similar approach, and we made a big investment there as well. And so we feel that whenever we can have our dollars leveraged, and when we can have additional reach, it is very important to get engaged. Because as you mentioned, this is not a solo sport. We need everybody rowing in the same direction to be able to accelerate the support small businesses need.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you brought up that in addition to the $5 million that you put in from your part of Wells Fargo, that there was an additional investment made, and that's something that I think companies are looking at more, as well as regular foundations. How do they use what would be their normal investment dollars out of Treasury, where they're storing money, so to speak, for social goods. So I'm glad you brought that up, because again, it's another tool in the toolbox there. But one of the things that you mentioned, contributing to this fund, and Elizabeth, I know you have a fund. One of the challenges, and especially when we talk about the federal government and the IRS, and whether it be a traditional corporate giving program or a corporate foundation, or depending on how the dollars are making its way, what are those intermediaries for companies that might not be looking at their Treasury investment dollars and other ways of giving, that need a 501c3 in order to give to? And I believe you have one at Hello Alice.
Sure, we sure do. So we've been proud to partner with the Global Entrepreneur Network, Gen Global. Actually, since the day we launched, we made a decision with Hello Alice to be a for-profit social enterprise, mostly so we could be a venture-backed organization, because machine learning is very expensive. And then we partner with Gen Global, who's a 501c3, who is supported by amazing organizations like the Hoffman Foundation. And what's really important is they are not some pass-through organization. Their mission is to support entrepreneurship and small business owners globally. So we've been a really aligned partnership. They also are very influential on how we engage with our diverse owners. Additionally, we host a grants council, which I'm very proud of, who are 12 organizations, from the Viscardi Center for People with Disabilities to Bunker Labs for Veterans, Black and Brown Founders, the Gay and Lesbian Chamber, the Kashaya Band of Pomo Indians, who review our applications on behalf of our enterprise partners to ensure that they are accessible, that we're using the appropriate language, that we are scoring them in a way that's conducive with those who wrote those applications. So we find that that's a really critical part of our work. The other thing I'll just mention is we are data nerds, data. Every application we get, we dig deep into our data warehouse and make sure that we are looking at systemic barriers that our owners are telling us about. So y'all brought up PPP, and in our applications for grants, we've asked, did you apply for a PPP? If not, why? Why didn't you? Did you receive it? Did you not? And went back to the SBA, to a lot of our partners, and said, here's what we're hearing, here's what we're seeing on the next round. For example, one of the biggest things we saw with our Hispanic counterparts is that there was zero banking relationships or there was a big language barrier. So we've put together e-learning guides in Spanish and English in partnership with Lindio and the National Hispanic Chamber, and most of all with network partners to ensure that we're increasing that outreach. So, we really believe in utilizing strong data, utilizing strong organizations, but then partnership, which in global, again, allows for straight philanthropic support and or looking at things like marketing dollars and so on. And then I don't want to be remiss with our colleagues from Wells Fargo mentioning CDFIs. I think those are critical institutions in our country. And there's other associated organizations like LISC or Global Giving, also great institutions to look at as intermediaries or partners.
Good. Thank you for that. And you had mentioned barriers and you talked about guides that you create. But I also know, Elizabeth and Jenny, that you utilize mentors to help small businesses as well. And Elizabeth, you and I first worked together 20 years ago on an employee volunteering initiative. And I know a lot of our listeners are wondering, how can we get our employees engaged? We have seen examples with skills-based volunteering where there's a small business where a company, or it could be a group of companies or a corporate volunteer council, for instance, that, okay, here's my marketing mentor, here's my finance mentor, here's my operations mentor, et cetera. But can you talk a little bit about how you would see employee volunteer programs tapping in to help be mentors for small business?
Oh, absolutely. One of my favorite things that have come out of the pandemic, I guess there are positives, is the excitement and willingness to not just write checks to small business owners, but to help. So we've been working with groups. I'll use Verizon as an example. And so we deployed grants on behalf of Verizon. Employees wanted to help. So they, first of all, reviewed applications, which was a huge help for us, relieved a lot of time on our end. They then, to your focus, or what you said, did skills-based mentorship over video. So maybe it's accounting support, maybe it was marketing support. But then what we also figured out is a lot of small business owners really wanted to just talk to generalists at corporations. A lot of this is not as complex as folks think. They just need someone to talk to, be a sounding board. And so we did a lot of matching between employees and small business owners. And then finally, for those who are, we're all time poor, but those senior executives who maybe have a limited time, this virtual world is wonderful. So we could put 30 to 300 small business owners on to talk about, how do we go after rent relief? How do I go through digital transformation? This is a big one. Every small business in America right now must be cashless. They must have a website. I mean, there's just so much they have to do that they haven't had to do traditionally. So having folks walk them through those steps have been really important. So, and finally, the last thing I'll mention that I saw a lot of companies do, is they were employing small businesses to keep their employees engaged and their cultures alive. So we saw Visible, another telecommunications company, for example, provide cooking classes for their own employees. but they'd make sure to hire a diverse small business owner who's a chef to do that, yoga instructors who were out of work, just really cool classes and things to give to their employees because they're not in the office, but making sure they hired diverse small businesses to do that. So I think there's a zillion wonderful ways, thanks to technology, that can be engaged.
And on that note, what you said, not as complex as folks think. I think that's a key point that we need to bring out. Jenny, how are you utilizing mentors?
Yeah, so we had to pivot our model. We have traditionally been very hands-on. We have volunteers, thousands that go out to do technical assistance support. But due to COVID, we had to pivot and try to figure out how to do this remotely. So we partnered with the Pacific Community Ventures. They have a small business mentorship program that they partner you, and you can do it digitally. So you don't have to be in the same space or in the same state or city. So we have volunteers going through that platform to mentor and coach small businesses, as well as we have many of our colleagues sitting on panels to explain, for example, the PPP process. And we have them in a variety of languages so that we can get the information out to as many people as possible through a variety of channels. And so we have seen our colleagues just get activated because they truly care. They want to make a difference, and they want to use their skills in a way that they feel has a meaningful impact. So we're really glad for organizations who've developed these platforms. We're certainly looking at how we transform our volunteerism, not just as a response to COVID, but generally how we evolve it over time.
Yeah, and I think what you said about truly caring is really important because, that's where we've seen Wells Fargo and so many other, corporate volunteers. I mean, they want to make a difference as part of purpose at work. So, and I think that's where is Elizabeth, you said, the pandemic, has provided kind of a silver lining as far as the virtual applications that we did not fully utilize prior to the pandemic. But this has been a great conversation, and we need to wrap up now. But I do want to ask each of you one last question, and that is, what advice would you give to listeners who are thinking about looking at their company's corporate citizenship programs to support small businesses? So, Jenny, why don't we start with you?
I think that as those of us in corporate social responsibility and philanthropy imagine the future, we have to build it back differently. We can't go back to what we had prior to COVID because we understand that didn't work. COVID amplified a lot of the inequality that was already present. And so as we imagine how we come out of this and what our role is as corporate leaders, we have to think about those issues and ensure that we are removing any systematic barriers that were there to accelerate and support long-term growth of these diverse of all small businesses, but particularly those that are diverse who we know were hardest hit. So it's an incredible time to reimagine the future and work with the business to put all of our assets on the table and then figure out, how does this connect? How do we evolve even our own business? And so it's a really exciting time. I think that's one of the things that gives me a lot of hope, is that we could build it. We could and should. So I leave you with that little bit of inspiration for the future.
I think that is inspirational for all of us. So thank you, Jenny. Appreciate it. Elizabeth, the last word.
Capital's king in the short term. We've got to get funding out to our small business owners so we lower those long-term fail rates. So whether you're grants, loans, investments, hello, Alice, we stand here ready to partner with any enterprise group. I'll also say any kind of deferments on payments and any business service is welcome. And then mentorship, reach out, support your small business owners, join communities, help them. And then I'm so with Jenny. I'm so optimistic in the long term that we've certainly uncovered a lot of barriers, a lot of problems, but I do see that as opportunity, that we're going to use data and show that we're going to come out of this stronger. So thank you, Jeff. It's been a real honor. And Jenny, it was great learning from you as well.
Likewise. Thank you. It's been so fun.
And I share both of your optimism. Thank you both very much. This has been a really, really interesting and important discussion. And thank you all for listening. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, please visit conference-board.org, where you'll find a host of other resources focused on COVID-19 response and relief through the lens of our different think tanks in the U.S., Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, and more on the work that we're doing specifically in corporate citizenship around communities. Thank you and be well.
This has been ESG News and Views from the Conference Board.